you raised a seed round of $35 million, even though the company launched like a year ago.
But very, very quickly, we ended up getting like big customers like Strava, Shopify, Roku, who trusted us. And why did they trust us? Because the hardest part of a startup, in some sense, is the first like 6 months to a year. Because you barely have a product, you don't have money. You know, when you start, before you even have a product, right, you should have like something that is demoable, right? Something that maybe people can even use. If you're solving something very real, you see that people get excited and they start to maybe almost sell it back to you why this is important. There's this belief that if founders take an exit, they're doing the wrong thing. Actually, I think it's bullshit.
Also, if you're listening to these episodes and everything we're saying sounds interesting, we're currently helping some of the fastest growing startups in San Francisco hire out their teams. So if you're a growth hacker or an engineer or a designer, there is a link below for you to fill out your information, and we'll connect you with some of the fastest growing companies in the city. All right. Spiros, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited for this one. The way we met was actually very, very strange and very recent. I was at your event that you hosted, 1 or 2 weeks ago, because I realized you guys were hosting it a block away from our office. I basically came just to say what's up to Amjad, and then we got introduced to you, and I started to hear about what you're building with Resolve. It's actually quite interesting. I guess for audience context, you're building machines on call for humans, which means that while everyone else is kind of building like AI agents to like replace coding or to make coding easier, you're actually building AI agents for like the software engineering side of the stack. And so why is it that you're going that route?
Yeah, so, I mean, first of all, it's exciting that, let's say, AI can create art or, do creative work. But, for us, what's more exciting is if AI can actually do the work we don't want to do as humans, right? And, most of us are engineers at Resolve. We have experienced what it means to actually build and maintain software at scale. In my last role, after my last company got acquired by Splunk, I was the GM for Splunk Observability. It's a big production system, right? We had a period over 6 months where 90% of our SRE team resigned because of burnout.
Oh.
And because if you have incidents all the time and if it's hard to keep systems up, it's a very difficult job, right? Like waking up in the middle of the night to solve a problem is something that nobody wants to do. And we felt like actually that, although that problem was always known, we felt like now AI is at the point where with agents, we can actually do this type of work and relieve humans from, let's say, the pain and the burden of on-call and, the challenge of maintaining production systems.
And so how do you differentiate between like what is like an agents company and what is just like a chained series of like workflows?
That's a very good point. So I think that in a way, people always try to automate,
Zapier,
tasks, especially in this space, right? Like, when something goes wrong, even alerting itself, right? You fire an alert and you trigger a workflow. In my opinion, like the difference with agents is that they can actually, first of all, learn and generalize from prior experience, right? A workflow automation usually is something that, you execute within the bounds of, some predetermined set of actions. When this happens, maybe these other three things follow, and after that, you take A or B. With agents, and first of all, in like software systems at scale, there are so many edge cases. There is no way you can predict, all the potential outcomes or corner cases. So agents, especially how we're building it, they can actually learn and they can reason, almost like humans, and they can generalize, right? So that makes them applicable to all sorts of problems that, nobody has thought about it in advance.
That's very interesting. And like, a lot of the time when you build a company, you've built a few now, you kind of start out with some like broad problem set that you want to work in. And then over time you figure out who your customer is, how to get to them, you raise funding. It feels like you're kind of one-shotting it and that you raised a seed round of $35 million. And from talking to your team, you already have 50 people on the team, even though the company launched like a year ago. So what was that process for you?
So, first of all, in our case, maybe starting with more basics. Like I'm a huge believer that the only way to build a company, especially an enterprise company, is to work with customers. And I think if you do that well, and if you're honest with yourself, I think you can get to the truth, let's say, about what is a real problem and what is not a real problem very, very quickly, right? So at Resolve, we've been working with design partners from day one, before we had the product.
Oh, interesting.
And the way this happened is we went and interviewed, let's say, 100 people before we started, and tried to validate, is this a big pain for them, right? Would they be interested in a new way of solving this problem, right? Like, would they be interested in a kind of a way of automating all these, software engineering toil, if you wish? And many of them said yes, and in fact, they said we're very interested to work with you, right? We're like, okay, if you're interested, let's start working together from day one. So that gave us the ability to validate and iterate very, very quickly. So we got to very high confidence of, let's say, the problem market fit, if you wish, within like a matter of months. In fact, what happened is when we started the company, Mayank, who's my co-founder, and I, we wanted to self-fund the company for a year. And the reason for that is because we wanted ourselves to get to high confidence that this is an important problem and we have a lot of impact. And throughout this process I was explaining, very quickly, like in a matter of 2-3 months, we realized that the demand was more than we expected, and our ability to deliver value very quickly was probably more likely than we thought. That's what actually changed our perspective, and we went to this, what you call one-shot approach, where we raised $35 million. We actually did it with a lot of confidence that we were onto a big problem, and we had like a good path of solving it well. And also the market was big enough to support like a company that could raise $35 million and grow.
And so, when you think about like the traditional advice people give at accelerators or VCs give, it's like talk to customers, have these like pilots set up. But when you're having these conversations, like what does the conversation look like? If I'm a founder and you're selling to me, like what are you actually asking me to figure out if I have this problem?
Yeah, first of all, it depends on the stage, right? But before we started the company, I would go and say, okay, in our own experience, this has been a big problem. Mm-hmm. Is it a big problem for you? Maybe that starts the conversation. But then you have the right to ask, what else is a big problem for you right now, right? Is it something adjacent to what I'm describing? Or, something completely different that, bothers you? And, another thing that I learned over the years is that, users and customers, whether it's an interview like the one I'm describing, or they are already using the product, they're very good they know their pain for sure, right? Mm-hmm. And usually they try to articulate a solution. The solution is mostly wrong. But if you actually can dig deeper, you can uncover a real pain for which people will pay money for, right? And obviously this is a very iterative process that gets you to an answer if you do it well, in my opinion. And then the other thing, by the way, I encourage people, we did well, is when you start, before you even have a product, right, you should have like something that is demoable, right? Something that maybe people can even use, because that gives you a much better sense very quickly if what you're building is the right thing, right? I actually, the thing I tell my team internally oftentimes as a joke is, you first sell, then you design, then you build.
Right.
But there is truth to it, right? Like the more you can, make this circle faster, the more likely it is that you're going to build a useful product.
And so tactically, when you're like selling to these founders, are you quite literally telling them, we don't have a product built, but we'll build you a custom solution?
Not like that, right? The way I would do it, like if I'm early on, right? Say if I'm starting again, right? The way I would do it is, first of all, I would probably have a thesis. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be completely open-ended, right? Like our thesis in our case was that, like running and maintaining and troubleshooting these large software systems is very painful and very, very heavy on humans, because the tools we have, are, don't provide any intelligence basically, right? And all falls back on humans. So we had that thesis, right? And then, I would go and ask the question, right? Is this true? Do you agree? What else do you see, right? Is there something that has even more value? And then, but once you start having, I would say, a product, then the way I would do it is I would say, okay, here's a demo of the product. Is it something you would use? How would you describe this back to me even, right? Like you try to get if people understand first of all what it does, and I think what happens is if you're solving something very real, you see that people get excited and they start to maybe almost sell it back to you why this is important.
Yeah, interesting.
I think that's a very good way to know if you're into something that actually.
If people are selling it back to you.
Yes, and it's good. It's like oftentimes I stop and ask a question. Okay, what do you think? Why is this even important? Why solve it now?
And you were just showing them kind of a quickly thrown together prototype or a mock-up.
Correct, prototype and combination of mock-ups, maybe a demo, maybe a product. It evolved quickly, of course, but there was always, let's say, a user interface that was real, and the capabilities behind it were evolving.
Got it. And when you went about raising the round, it helps that, I guess, for audience context, your current co-founder and you previously built a company that exited for 9 figures in the course of a year and a half. Yes. And so naturally, as a second time or multiple time founder, you're going into the fundraising. VCs already have a lot of confidence in you. But what stage in the product cycle were you reaching out to them and saying, I know what I want to build?
First of all, I guess, the game is a little unfair in that sense, right? Like if you're a multi-time founder and, especially if you have an exit, had 2 exits, it is a lot easier, right? Now, this is for good reasons in my opinion, right? Like obviously, there is more confidence that you know what you're doing and, maybe more confidence that you can scale a team and all of that, right? But, in our case, what happened is we actually didn't want to raise money. Like
Right.
what I told you earlier, we wanted to run the company and self-fund it for a year to get to lots of proof that it works and high confidence ourselves. What happened is, I would say there were a few maybe smart investors that kind of had the similar thesis at the same time we did, right? Because we're talking now maybe almost a year and a half ago, right?
Right.
But it was not yet obvious that agents are gonna be the thing, right? But I think people who have thought about this problem a lot probably had developed their own independent thesis. And what happened is a few of them, including Greylock and Sam, who ended up investing, came to us and said, we believe this is a big problem. We believe that your team maybe is the best team to solve it. So we're interested in working with you, right? So to us, it was a very straightforward approach, especially because, to me, investors' ideal is not just money, right? It's somebody you can work with, right?
Right.
If they join your board, you can brainstorm, right? And you can debate, and you can convince them, and they can convince you back about something. So we felt that we found somebody that was, a great partner, and then it became a discussion of, okay, what is the amount of money you need, and the valuation, right? And if we can agree, we would do it. So we didn't actually go out to pitch many investors, right? We knew what we wanted, and once we got it, we just did it. And of course, then we had also a lot of great, amazing angel investors that joined the round, who also helped us with advice, with credibility, with connections.
Interesting. And were you at a point where you wanted to initially raise a smaller amount, or did you kind of calculate that you wanted 35 million?
Our view was that this is a very big market, and we have to move relatively quickly, right? So we felt that kind of a pre-seed type of round would not help us much, especially as experienced founders that could do some of the funding ourselves. So our goal was to go more to a real seed or A, depending on how you think about it, right? Now the round ended up becoming a little bit bigger than what was our threshold, but we also tried to keep it within bounds, right? Like we said, okay, probably we need to raise more than $20 million to move quickly, but also we didn't want to go to 50.
Right.
So we ended up actually at 35, which in retrospect, I think it was a very good amount because it gave us the confidence to execute, move quickly, and we still have most of the money.
Nice. What is your allocation, right? Because as a first-time founder, there's you kind of spend a lot of your money on engineering, right? But I went to the event that you guys hosted. It was definitely not a small-scale event, not a small budget event. And that's kind of different for a seed stage company, even in this market. So what was your kind of calculations or thought process around how you split your funding between product, sales, marketing?
I actually tweeted this, if you haven't seen it, first-time founders focus on product, second-time founders focus on distribution, third-time founders focus on memes.
Oh.
That's a joke, of course, but I think there is some truth to that. If you have a great team, right, and you have a great product, obviously distribution matters a lot, but even awareness matters a lot, right? Especially in AI. And I wouldn't start there unless I was very confident that what I'm building or what I have as a product is very valuable and useful. But once you have that, it honestly makes a difference if, let's say, people are aware of what you're building, right? And if the company has a strong brand. And the brand helps also, to convince people to join you, right? So in some sense, maybe in AI, everything is moving a lot faster, and a lot of things that maybe came later in prior generations now come a little bit earlier. But if you do it right, you can achieve a lot more, right? Because if you do things in parallel, also in some sense, you get to great milestones a lot faster, and by having spent less money also, right? Because if you spend 2 years building a product, and then another year, let's say, starting to sell it, and then another year to build, let's say,
you've burnt a lot
market,
more.
in some sense, in those 4 years or 3 years, you spend a lot more money than you spend in a year and a half when you parallelize a lot of these things. Of course, you have to time everything very well.
Interesting. And so what was your V0 of your go-to-market? After, or I should say, what was your V1 after you had contracts and you had customers that wanted your product?
But by the way, we actually moved to production with customers before they were paying us. We said because our goal, and we're honest with them, was listen, we want to learn, we want to provide more value back to you, but also want to learn. And as a founder, I've done essentially, I participated in every customer conversation almost, right, or every sale that has happened so far. Nothing that is unusual maybe from what you've seen elsewhere, lots of founder-led sales. But also the other thing maybe we did is, once we got to confidence that, this is an important problem and we can build a great product, we actually started adding people and go to market. I have a good friend, his name is Josh. We worked together in the last company. He has done sales and product, so we convinced him to join us a year ago, way before we actually started selling.
So then what does that conversation look like when you're trying to convince someone you've worked with before to jump with you on a new thing?
I think the hardest part of a startup, in some sense, is the first 6 months to a year.
Okay.
Because you barely have a product, you maybe or maybe not don't have money. It takes a lot of faith for people to jump in and do it. And I think most people who are aspiring founders, in my mind, give up during that time.
Yeah.
And that's what shows if you have what it takes, right? Which is a lot of faith in yourself. Now, if you have a lot of faith, right, this truly then, it becomes I had a lot of conviction, right? I could go to my friends and say, I truly believe this is the best thing for you, right? It's the best time for you to join. And, I didn't do it to just convince them. I believed it was the best thing for them. And I actually try to think that way, right? Like when I'm trying to convince somebody to join us, I try to think from their perspective, right? Or I try to think from their side, am I truly doing the right thing for everyone else, right?
Yeah.
And as a founder, at the end of the day, after a bunch of people have joined you and a bunch of customers decided to use your product, the responsibility towards them is much bigger than kind of your own outcomes out of this. So I think that way a lot.
One thing I've realized, I think recently from probably spending too much time on Twitter, is the 18 to maybe let's just say 28, 30-year-old kind of crowd on Twitter. A lot of them are going to work at high potential startups only to leave 5 or 6 months later because they're so inspired that they want to go do their own thing. Do you see that happening? Have you dealt with that in the past?
Not as much, right? I would say, yes, in my first company, we had folks who joined and left because maybe we didn't have enough traction almost, right? Not so much because of inspiration. At Resolve in particular, we're now a bit more than a year old. We didn't have to face that problem, but also things have been going well, right?
Right.
Had a lot of traction, team has been growing. Now, maybe I'll answer it in a different way. I think that if you're trying to build an enterprise company, there is a lot of know-how that you can gain if you work at the right company. And even a couple of years of experience will probably make you a much better founder.
Certainly.
In that space. That doesn't mean that you have to have it, right? Many people became successful without that.
Right.
But I think also that helps a lot.
As you're talking to customers, you guys, from talking to your team, you have a very kind of specific perspective when it comes to this whole debate of whether or not agents are going to replace software engineers. First off, I guess I should ask, what is your perspective on that?
So, as a 4-time founder, I'm an optimist, of course.
Of course.
But first of all, I think that in a way, it's true what people say that agents are obviously lowering the bar or the floor and raising the ceiling. So they allow us to do a lot more people to essentially participate maybe in technology, and I think allow us to solve harder problems faster than we could in the past. My belief is that there is so much more technology and software that we can build to solve more problems that it's not a question of is essentially software engineering as a profession going to go away because of agents. I think we're going to have more people working in technology. It's probably going to look very different than what it is today or what it was until recently. But I think the end result of this is, I think, us producing a lot more technology to the benefit of everybody, right? Making problems that were very expensive or hard a lot cheaper or accessible to the world. And that's going to benefit humanity, in my opinion, despite the trade-offs from here to there, right? I think the end result is going to be much, much better, and our technology output is going to increase dramatically. And I think that more people are going to work in technology, right? Being a software engineer is actually a great thing, in my opinion, right now. It's just that you have to adjust, obviously, how you do it.
Do you find yourself ever getting into these philosophical debates with the team, or does everyone kind of think the same way?
I don't know. We do actually. We have lunch and dinner every day, and a lot of the conversations we have during those are less about business and more about okay, how does the future look like, or something new and interesting that happened. Even our own perspective, in some sense, over the past year has changed, right? I think that obviously we believe we can solve this problem very well, and we can do it in a way that we relieve humans from the toil, and we can achieve better outcomes and create a lot of productivity. But honestly, I keep track of things that surprise me over time, and one of them is that I think we're moving a lot faster, and our agent is a lot more effective, a lot more quickly than I expected.
Why do you think that is?
I think that in a way models improved quite fast. We're kind of in an exponential curve of improvement, right? And maybe it's hard to comprehend or visualize that when you're in the earlier phases, right? Or even today, maybe it's hard for us to predict what's going to happen in 6 months. But what I can tell you is, looking back, we made a lot more progress than what I expected a year ago.
You know, on that point, one of the things we were talking to Amjad about earlier today is at Replit, they don't have like a roadmap. And he says it's because things are changing so fast that you can't put together like what's going to happen in a year. And so for you guys, is there like some version of that?
We don't have a roadmap either. What we do actually is that we use OKRs, and we set like annual OKRs, which are very like ambitious outcomes almost, right? It's not like specific things we want to achieve. It's like, you know, if we were to achieve like, you know, our most, or solve the most difficult problems we're facing, right? Or, you know, scale a lot more, how would it look like? And that's mostly for alignment and for, you know, setting up, you know, goals that everybody can kind of aim for. Then we do quarterly planning. But even at the quarterly planning, which is more realistic, still we're not trying to say, okay, let's build this feature or let's solve this particular problem. We're saying, okay, what, again, great could look like in a quarter. And, you know, in what happens practically speaking is that you underestimate what you can do in a year, and you always overestimate what you can do in a month or a quarter, right? But that's healthy, right? Because you always feel that you're behind your goals for the quarter, and then when you get to the end of the year and you look back at the goals you set, you say, wow, like, how did I do all of this? So I think it's quite healthy.
One of the most interesting things I think about your story is the fact that you met your co-founder in grad school, and since then you've kind of worked together and you sold your last company and you had all these large outcomes. What has been your process of maintaining that relationship? Because a lot of the companies that fail, early on, they fail because of co-founder disputes.
First of all, I completely agree with that, right? Like sometimes us founders blame investors. You know, it's very rare that you're going to see an investor doing something so disruptive to a company, unless almost it's absolutely necessary, right? It's probably warranted if it happens. I think it's founders themselves screwing up. And it's oftentimes what you say, right? It's founders, you know, disagreeing and not able to work with each other. I think that's much more common cause of like startup failure than it is investors. So I know Mayank for 20 years. Actually, we met in our first day in grad school. So he grew up in India, I grew up in Greece. We show up in Illinois at UC, and there's this international student orientation, and somehow we sit next to each other, so we met there. Now, we didn't start working together, but you know, I remember from like classes, and he was my TA actually in computer architecture. I remember him being brilliant, right? So I ended up starting a company, dropping out of my PhD to start a company with my advisor and 2 other students. Mayan was not one of them. But I remember how brilliant he was, so I tried many times to recruit him in my first company. And you know, I never convinced him. But after we got acquired, that company got acquired by VMware in 2012, I think I finally was able to convince him, maybe partially because I didn't feel as a huge risk, but also partially I think his goal was to actually start a company, right? So he felt if you joined a group of people who have done this before, maybe it's the best place to be. And then we worked together more or less since then. And in 2018, we did Omniscient, co-created OpenTelemetry, which is a whole different thing, an open source project that became quite successful. And I think the reason for the fact that we were able to work together and start now a second company is there is a lot of trust. There is a lot of trust in each other's skills. There is a lot of trust that both of us are aiming for the right thing. We have like a very strong alignment. No, we never go behind each other's back for anything. We always try to solve the problems. It's very, very important. Even if we have some major disagreement, it's between the two of us to solve it. And also we don't step on each other, right? Like we trust that he's the CTO, I'm the CEO. We obviously have opinions, but we also we're honest with ourselves that if you want to be the best CTO in the world, let's say, and I want to be the best CEO I can be for the company, and that helps quite a bit.
How has that dynamic changed as you've gone through these exits or as you've gone through multiple companies?
Actually, it's the same. Actually, when we sold our last company, I thought I won't start another startup.
Really?
Yes. I mean, I said this every time, by the way, but the reason is that startups are very hard, right? And especially if you're the CEO or the founder, it is extra hard because there's nobody else to go complain to. But after, and I had a very interesting role at Splunk who acquired us. I was the GM for a big business. But then I realized that, I was trying my best, but I was feeling like at the large organization, my efforts had minimal impact, right? Maybe after a year of effort, you kind of moved the ship a little. But, I was very intentional about going back and starting a company again. And what I told myself is I will either do it with Mayank, or if he doesn't want to do it or he's not available, I'll just do it on my own. Because I truly think there is huge risk in terms of working with as a co-founder if the fit and the match is not there.
And what was it with omniscient, like what was it that made the company work? Because again, going from 0 to a 9-figure exit in like under 2 years is almost unheard of.
Under a year and a half. I'll tell you, like, not different from what we did here. Like, we found a problem that was very painful. And what Omniscient did, by the way, was that, in 2018, most people started building applications assuming they were run on the cloud. So we used Kubernetes and containers and microservices. So a lot more complexity and velocity, right? And traditional tools for monitoring and APM, as we call it, did not work at all, right? Because they were designed for monolithic apps. And we kind of discovered this pain through our own experiences. So we had like a lot of confidence that it's an important problem. And then we had a lot of confidence in this process of working very closely with customers to solve real problems and innovate that way, right? So what happened is that very, very quickly we ended up getting like, big customers like Strava, Shopify, Roku, who trusted us. And why did they trust us? Because we were solving this specific problem much better than anyone else, right? I would say so. It's this process of being very customer oriented, maybe believing in your own process or believing in the process in some sense, right? That if you keep doing that, you'll get to a great outcome. And that resulted in us, like I said, having strong traction. And many of the companies that were bigger at the time approached us for an acquisition. Now our goal was not to sell the company. In fact, because we had a lot of traction, our default was not to do it. We went through multiple rounds of kind of offers. In the end, the reason that made us sell that company was that it wasn't clear to us there was a path to a big company. We were solving an important problem, but it wasn't clear, or it seemed unlikely for us to be able to build a big company from the problem we started.
That makes sense. And like after you kind of have like, this large inflow of cash kind of like hit your bank account, how does that change the way you think about risk, and how does that change the way you like kind of live your life? Because a lot of the founders that we've seen who are kind of earlier in their career, they'll go like 20 hours a day. They're like living in hostels in the little pods in the marina, like 5 people in a 2-bedroom apartment.
I mean, obviously, if you have an exit or something like that, it kind of, I don't think, for most people I know, right, who did it, myself included, or Mayank, I don't think it changes your lifestyle. I mean, you are who you are. First of all, if you're a founder, there must be something wrong with you, most likely. It's not like you're going to fix it because you had an exit. So, but it does make things easier, right? Like you can take more risk, you can, be more selective, maybe you can take time off if you're working on a problem. Like, I resigned from Splunk before I knew exactly what I want to do in between Resolve and Splunk and Resolve. It makes things easier, right? And I think that one thing I would say maybe that is contrarian is that there's this belief that if founders take an exit or something like that, they're doing the wrong thing. Actually, I think it's bullshit, and I think the best way to create wealth, especially if you take risk, is to actually consider something like this, right? Like if an opportunity of this nature comes, and if it works for everybody, right? You shouldn't also focus just on yourself. Then I don't think we should be judging anybody who does it. Now, if there is a path for a much bigger thing, you owe to yourself also, right, to actually think about that. But also, to me, this says that not every startup should be VC funded. There are many problems out there that you can solve very well, that you can be very successful, you can have an exit at some point, and without essentially, putting your back against the wall, right? Without, having the only outcome be like a huge outcome that might be unlikely for what you're building.
I think you have an interesting perspective in that I think it's rare to find founders talk about a high growth, high traction company and look at it and say like, this might not be a $1 billion outcome, like our market might be too small. What was it that kind of created that sentiment for you?
I mean, I don't know if like I could put a number to the outcome, but in our case, what happened is the problem we were solving at the time required basically, if you explain technically, it required let's say users to go and instrument their code for distributed tracing, right? That had a lot of friction in how a new user could be onboarded. Once you did it, there was a lot of value, but the pace at which you could move was limited by how fast people could do that, right? So we felt that would limit our growth and our ability to create a big company quickly. And in the meantime, there were other folks who were approaching, let's say, observability differently, that maybe allowed them to create a bigger company much more quickly. So it's not like it was an absolute no, you not build a big company. It was more like the amount of risk and the amount of friction it exists made us think that there was a price for which it made more sense to join a bigger company and do it there.
So what are some of like the agents or like the AI tools that you use as you're building Resolve that you didn't have when you were trying to build Omnition?
I mean, everything, right? Somebody was asking me, the CTO of a company was asking me, you have metrics of productivity. I said, we don't have metrics of productivity, but I can tell you this, if we take the AI tools, everybody will resign. So, obviously we use Resolve a lot. Like, we use it for any type of task or question we have around production. We use it for every alert and incident. Even if it doesn't fully work like for something, we actually go and try to understand what happened, right? So we're the first users and we use it to improve the product a lot. And actually it's very satisfying because me, as a user of the product, I can see how it gets better every week, right? So it's a great way to assess. Of course, we use coding tools and we used all of them, right? I think
Cursor, Windsor.
Yeah, lately, Cloud Code is very popular.
Yeah.
And we created one of our engineers created like a memories file that helps a lot. But yeah, some people use Cursor, some people use Copilot or a combination of Copilot and Cloud Code. But we use AI everywhere else, right? Like, whether it's something as generic as ChatGPT or Gemini, or like specific tools we use in marketing or sales, or anywhere else.
How are you using AI with marketing and sales outside of just like writing email copy?
We review contracts.
Don't let your legal team hear that.
Actually I do that, right? Every time I receive a contract, whether it's a customer or a vendor, I'm not saying that's the only thing we do, but
you put it
usually like, okay, what should I pay attention to here, right? But we try to do, obviously other things, right? Like, first of all, I do believe that in sales and marketing especially, like, there is a lot of value in actually, a human in the loop and a personal touch, right? So we're not trying to go all the way to the other end, right? But, we use it a lot to do research, to understand maybe which customers could benefit more from our product because they use the tools that the agent knows how to use. We use it to help our own team, let's say, do their job faster and help them, whether it's content or whether it's understanding who is the DL profile of a user. But, we don't also, I think there is a risk of becoming too impersonal also, right?
One of the tropes that we've been overusing recently is like you can't build a great company without hiring great people. And now as you're kind of going into this with the background that you have or like the exits you have and the funding that you have and the backers that you have, what does it look like to kind of have this open pool of talent? Like how do you kind of select people?
I mean, actually at a startup, it's always hard to recruit, right? And I think many founders say that they prioritize talent, but I've been spending probably 70% of my time on this, right? And that's the only way to do it. Now, especially in AI, right, where things are moving so fast and where you're dealing with very, very hard problems, like we do in AI for software engineering, you need to have both a bit deep problem of the domain or the problem you're solving, but also a pretty deep understanding of, let's say, how models work and how agentic AI actually can be effective. So it takes like deep expertise in both to do it well. And what I observed is that we were able to recruit folks who come, let's say, from research labs and from like deep research experience. And these folks would never work in an enterprise company before. And I think the reason for that is, because AI is changing like how we work, right? Like it's not just a tool now that an engineer is going to use. It's actually something that does the work. And that's very interesting as a problem, and it's very impactful, right? So you see for the first time, people who would in the past only work at a lab, let's say, or at a consumer company, joining maybe an enterprise company because the impact you can have is maybe even bigger than the consumer world, right? Obviously ChatGPT or similar tools are amazing, but in the enterprise space, you can actually build something that does the work of a human, or the 70% of it, right? And that's hugely impactful, and it can happen today. And that also, first of all, to do that, you need amazing talent, but also amazing talent is interested in participating in something like this.
Let's say you have this person now who's really interested in joining the team and they've kind of said yes. What does the onboarding look like?
Another thing we did is that we spend a lot of time thinking about recruiting and thinking about, the experience of people who join us. So, because we're still early, we try to have documentation and tools and all of that, but the other thing we do that works very well, we usually assign a buddy to somebody. And we have like an onboarding plan for a week, basically, right? where each of the day they have kind of some sort of a goal, and they have their body. They can ask any question, anything that blocks them to unblock, right? And I think the sooner you get to some win or understanding how everything works, the more confident you become, and the easier the next few steps also become.
And if you're having a conversation with someone, you mentioned kind of like these AI research labs, who is on the brink of joining an OpenAI or an Anthropic, how do you convince them, or what is that conversation of kind of having them say no to that and say yes to you?
Yeah, so first of all, it's very hard because obviously, all these are companies with a lot of interesting problems. They pay very well. But I think they're also already bigger companies in some sense, right? So the amount of freedom and flexibility and work you're going to do there is not necessarily at the same level as a smaller startup like we are, right? You can have a lot more impact. You can bet a lot more on yourself even, right? OpenAI is probably going to be successful despite any individual at this point, right? Where somebody joining us can actually make a difference between the company making it or not. And I think that's very impactful and it's very, very kind of satisfying. Now, it doesn't mean everybody wants to do that, but I think the types of people who can go work at OpenAI have this ability, right? And maybe betting on themselves is very powerful. So I would say, what convinces somebody to join us versus a bigger lab is that, you can do potentially more interesting work, you can move a lot faster, and you can have a lot more impact.
So do you work with recruiters, or how do you actually end up with like a list of people that you could potentially hire?
A lot of it is referrals from people who we recruited. And what I observed is obviously, great people have great colleagues they worked with, and that's a strong signal. But also the more you add like amazing people to the company, the easier it becomes to also reach out to somebody. They will look up who's in the company, and it becomes a little easier. We have in-house recruiters, and one of our first hires was a recruiter actually. I'm a huge believer in doing that early.
Really?
And I think many founders actually do it too late. And then we iterated a lot in figuring out what is the right model and the right approach and the right experience for candidates. And we're way better today. I'll probably argue we're way better than most big companies actually in how we do it. In both like how to find the people who are great and how to ensure that they understand the impact they can have when they join us. We worked also with external recruiters, but very, very selectively.
And so do you have like a system that is like quantitative of like, hey, if you work at the company, you should refer your friends, or does it happen organically?
It happens organically. I think that it's, honestly, the best way for that to happen is people join the company and they have fun and they feel like they made the right decision. And, I see that, you don't even have to do anything, right? People really want their friends to join them because they feel like this is the right thing and they have a lot of fun.
What is your company culture like? When do people get in? When do they leave?
Yeah, so we're in person. And that was a decision we made like before it was cool.
It has become very cool in the last year,
Yes.
yeah, 100%.
And for us, we made that decision because we ourselves felt like during COVID, it wasn't fun and, we're not productive, right? So we wanted to go back to, first of all, it was a very hard problem. So to us, it meant that, we have to have like high velocity and lots of context and, easy collaboration, right? These were the decisions. It was definitely the right decision. I think it is sometimes a bit polarizing about people. Some people want to work remotely, but also maybe it helps, right? Because there is another set of people that actually want to work in person.
Certainly.
So we don't have specific hours, right? Most people show up between, let's say, 8 and 10. Some people maybe go home. People who have families go home, let's say, at 6. People who, a lot of people have dinner at the office. It's also, I stay for dinner many days because it's a good time also to have like just discussions, right? Not about work. It's intense, but AI is intense in general because things change often. When you have a lot of traction, there are many, many problems you're trying to solve in parallel. But also I think we try hard to, let's say, not take ourselves too seriously, right? To also have fun and, enjoy being in the office. I enjoy it a lot, right? A heuristic I use for myself is when I wake up in the morning, do I look forward to going to the office? And the answer here has always been yes.
When was the last time your answer was no?
Not at Resolve.
Okay.
But it was true before, for sure.
Nice. Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. Okay, so I got 2 questions for you now before we wrap things up. The first one is, as you have all this experience of like building multiple things that have now succeeded, why do you think the main reason startups kind of struggle or fail is? Okay,
there are many reasons, but if I approach this from a product perspective, I think oftentimes people are almost not honest with themselves and maybe they try to do too many things at once. Like Resolve is a very ambitious company, right? We're building AI for software engineering and want to solve many of the problems that humans face in doing their job in that area, right? Starting with a lot of the things that have toil. But also we're certain that the only way to do that and the only way to gain the right to actually do more things is by solving one problem very, very well, right? And in our case, we started by solving, let's say, the problem of incidents and production issues that wake up people in the middle of the night. We want to do a very good job of solving that well and relieving humans from the pain. But at the same time, I think we're building a platform, if you wish, that understands software end to end and can help with many other things. But I think it's also a trap if you think that, or if you prematurely try to go into many other directions before you have solved one problem well. So that's how we approach it. And I oftentimes see, let's say, companies that have some success to maybe broaden their scope too quickly and then, not do anything great.
And so if we were to then do this podcast again in a year, and this is a question I ask everyone at the end of the episode, what would you have want to accomplish by then to consider the past year a success?
Okay, first I'll start with that I would like to wake up every morning and, be happy to go to work. And then, as a product and as a business, I hope that by then we would have solved, this one problem we started with very, very well. Would have a lot of happy users who, I guess, feel their life is better as a result. And hopefully by then, Resolve would have expanded to solve additional problems and help, engineers in more ways than what we started with.
Awesome. Well, I hope to see you in a year. I'll see you at the Series B.
It's going to be sooner than a year. But